All right, we're on Ruth chapter 3 tonight, and before we get started into the text, I wanted to see if there's anybody willing to share a time when you felt like you had to take a bold step of faith. Ooh, already. At least you know how to say it.
Yeah. But like I do
That's where the strange land comes from.
Yeah, but I have any like I didn't have any, like I always my family college go to college. I'm coming up here for a job. I was still am a little bit out of
What motivated you to take the leap?
a lot of people they
Nice, that's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And we're glad you're here. Yeah? Oh, yeah. Yeah. How many times did you do that? That's 84. Oof, a lot of leaps of faith. You never did pack it yourself? Yeah. That would probably worry me most of all. Anybody else have anything they want to share?
if I don't share anything.
Well, Maylou's not here, so you don't have to worry about surprising her.
Most of you know that I was back and the question was to love you or to make it work. And without the prospect of a job, without the prospect of what people hold, I told the elders that I would be doing our it was a very scary time for both,
Yeah.
but it was a step that I felt felt also wanted to therapy about figure out what the right course of action are. And very God's
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so we're seeing a pattern emerge, and I expected that we would, which is this idea that you find yourself in a situation where you need help or guidance or whatever it might be, and you can either just simply pray to God that He take care of that for you, or you could do that and take these steps, right? Take steps that maybe you're like unsure about. Is this the right thing I'm supposed to do? Maybe take steps that take you outside your comfort zone. And so you tend to doubt it just by sheer nature of wondering, like, I'm not going to be comfortable doing this. But the point is that you do something while you look to God. And I think that's the message that we're going to see tonight in Ruth 3. Because the theme for tonight is this idea that redemption requires faith, it requires obedience, and it requires a willingness to act. And of course, as long as you're acting in alignment with God's plan, right? everything is going to turn out okay. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started with verses 1 through 6.
And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security? Well, you, and now is not Boaz our kinsman, whose maid we were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, anoint yourself, put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies. And you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do." And she said to her, "All that you say, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor, and according to all that her mother-in-law.
Okay, so in the opening verses of chapter 3, we see that Naomi has a plan for Ruth, right? And keep in mind, Ruth is a foreigner. She's from Moab. She doesn't have any family members anywhere near where she is to come help her. Her husband has passed away. Her father-in-law has passed away. So on top of that, she's a widow with no children to care for her and no way for her mother-in-law to give her another son to marry to take care of her. So she's about as helpless as you could be in this society at this time. And Naomi shows concern for her. And I put chapter 1, verses 16 and 17 as a reference here, because if you go back and look in chapter 1, it was Ruth who was concerned about Naomi, and Ruth who wanted to stay with Naomi to take care of her. Now, when they're back, we're seeing Naomi reflecting that concern back onto Ruth. And even before this, we saw Naomi's, feeling bad and apologizing for the fact that she couldn't do anything to help Ruth. So this is her, I think, trying to figure out a way, how am I going to help this young woman who's stuck by my side no matter what? So she has a 3-step plan. Step 1, change out of your widow's clothes. Keep in mind, her husband had passed away, and most commentators seem to think that it has been recent enough that she would still be dressed in traditional mourning garments. So she's like, take off the mourning garments, put on regular clothes, present yourself as like someone who's available, who's moved past the mourning period. Step 2, don't put him on the spot. Don't do something in public in front of people that would make him feel like you're trapping him to act one way or the other. Because see, in this passage, she's talking about waiting till nighttime, right? Waiting till he goes to sleep, figure out where he's sleeping, uncover his feet, etc. Right? So it's don't do anything in public that would sort of force his hand. And then the 3rd step, which is John's favorite step, uncover his feet and lie down. What does that mean, John?
What does that mean, Steve?
I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on what that might mean? I have some thoughts. I don't know if I'm right or not, but anybody else want to weigh in on this? Why did she have Ruth uncover his feet? Yeah. Okay. Did I see any other hands? I saw one. Okay.
Naomi is giving Ruth a look at his himself, but also I am available not
100% agree, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide a little bit more. Matt? Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. But that makes perfect sense. For me, I was thinking more along the lines of, well, first of all, where I see he's lying down here, where's his feet? Uncover them so I know where they are so I can lay at his feet and put myself in a position of humility. And then the other thing I thought was, if somebody uncovered my feet, it would wake me up. At some point, I would wake up because my feet would be cold. And we see that he does wake up, and we'll see that here in a minute. But I think, so there's probably some combination of all those things, but I like what you said, Matt. That makes a lot of sense to me, too. I hadn't considered it to be part of the Harvest Festival. That makes a lot of sense, especially combined with what Will said about this being a marriage proposal, so to speak. Any other thoughts? Does that satisfy you, John? Good. Good. Okay, now, one more thing, side note here. She's going through a lot of trouble, and again, this is all pointing towards marriage. But isn't he obligated to take care of her? Didn't we say that he was a guardian kinsman or whatever they called it? That he was responsible for making sure that members of the tribe didn't have bloodlines that just ended, that he would help make sure that they would carry on? Well, you're getting ahead of us, Aaron. Yes, turns out that he might have been second in line. There was a closer kinsman. But my point is, why didn't Ruth just go say, take care of this? We're going to get to that here in a little bit, so keep that in your mind. Actually, let me just read what I have in my notes now instead of saving it for the next slide. So Ruth had a right to be taken care of here because we know that Boaz was her goal, Goel, or kinsman redeemer. She had the right to expect him to marry her and raise up a family to perpetuate the name of Elimelech. But Naomi wisely counseled Ruth to not come as a victim demanding her rights, but as a humble servant trusting in the goodness of her kinsman redeemer. So what Ruth is trying to say to Boaz essentially is, I respect you, I trust you, and I put my faith in your hands. So she could have come to him and said, you owe me this, take care of this. She could have done it in front of everybody, could have kind of made a scene out of it. But doing it this way, it's much more, I'm putting faith in you that you're going to do the right thing and you're going to take care of this. Mike? It endears her to him. Yes, absolutely. And so, whatever happens next, you expect there would be a closer relationship between the two of them because of this way of approaching it. Yeah. Yes. That's right. Yeah, and he will say that here in a little bit in the chapter as well. So what can we learn from this? Ruth takes an interesting approach at Naomi's instruction to go to Boaz, the Redeemer, the type of Christ. What can we learn from that? Aaron? That's true, but I mean, like, what can we learn for ourselves, for our own lives, by seeing this? Garrett. Yeah, that's what I'm exactly what I'm getting at. This idea of we could approach God with a, you promised this, where is it? Or we could be very humble, willing to act, willing to take that step of faith or that leap of faith that might be outside our comfort zone, or I don't know why do I have to uncover his feet again? But she did it, right? Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Um, but I think when you look at it from a bigger picture and you try to apply it to us today, I think that we can learn a lot from Naomi's plan of how to approach the Redeemer, and we can learn a lot from Ruth's willingness to obey, right? Jeff. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say at work, I tell people, like, when they'll say, well, what do we do? You talk about accountability, but what do we do if the person over there in the other part of the organization isn't delivering what they're supposed to deliver? And then I said, you go ask how you can help. Hey, I notice we're behind. What can I do to help meet this? Because we're all accountable together, right? Um, you're right. It's a powerful tool to use in every one of your relationships. Great point. Any other thoughts? I especially like this idea of Ruth is not playing a victim. She could easily play the victim. She could say, married this guy and he died and his brother died and his dad died and I'm here with this woman and I'm far away from, like, she could have been like, woe is me, but she's not doing any of that. And one one last question on this one. I like how it says at the end of this section that she said, I'll do whatever, right? I will do whatever you say, was Ruth's answer to Naomi. And I also wonder, like, how often do I tell God that? I'll do whatever you say. Even the stuff that I don't want to do, even the stuff that I don't understand. Why should I have to do that? I'm going to do it. Aaron? Yeah. Well, I mean, we know even Peter had a difficult time, right? I won't do that. I will never do that. And then he goes and does it. Dan?
In my head, I know if I go do that, that's all perfect. But I think I feel like
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And the other part of that too, I think, is, do we know? Like, we'll say, I'll do whatever you say, whatever you want. But what do you want? Do you want me to move to Louisville? Or do you want me to wait for the next opportunity? Or I know I personally can get paralyzed by that. What is the exact right move that I'm supposed to make? You live long enough, you start to realize that any of the moves, as long as you're faithful to God, will turn out okay, right? He'll eventually get you where you need to go. Josh? Yeah, that's right. I mean, like in my own life, I am finally seeing God's handiwork and taking care of things that I have been devastated by, that I have been begging Him for help for like 15 years, you know? And it's like, and when it finally hits you, oh, this is it. This is because in 15 years, there are many times where I got to the point where I was like, well, I get maybe it's just not. Maybe His answer was no, and I just didn't realize it, kind of thing. Yeah, that does make it much harder. Any other thoughts? All right. Faith requires trust. Ruth trusted Naomi, and so she approached Boaz with humility. And in doing so, she received a gracious response from him. Who has 7 through 8 or 9? Okay. So, Ruth's request. She did everything that Naomi told her to do. We've already talked about that. In the middle of the night, after she had uncovered his feet and lay at his feet, he was startled, and he woke up, and he sees this woman there, and he says, "Who are you?" And she asks him to spread his garment over her. Why do you think that is, John?
Makes more sense now, Steve.
But why was she asking for that? Probably was. Yeah, so in Ezekiel chapter 16 in verse 8, this is in this chapter, Jerusalem is being talked about as a prostitute and God trying to win her back. And in verse 8 it says, "Later I passed by, and when I looked at you and saw that you were old enough for love, I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your naked body. I gave you my solemn oath and entered into a covenant with you, declares the sovereign Lord, and you became mine." So here is this same imagery of spreading the corner of my garment over you. It's a way of saying, I will marry you. I will take care of you. I will protect you. You will become mine, my responsibility. So I think, as Will said earlier, she is requesting that he marry her. And my question for us to think about here for just a minute is, did she have a choice here? Like, was Ruth destined down this path? Or could she have gone another direction? Yep, she could have gone back home. What else? Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're right, but keep in mind, this is the time of the judges, and there are some pretty horrific things happening in Israel as well, and I think we're going to see an allusion to that here in just a minute later in the chapter. But at least in Moab, she has her family, and she has some sort of support network and protection that she could fall back on. Nancy? No. I 100% agree, and if somebody hadn't said that, I was going to bring that up. I think you're exactly right. She might have wanted to find a younger man. She might have wanted to find a man who, I don't know, different circumstances, maybe somebody who was richer. Like, who knows? Maybe she just wanted to explore her options. Was she attracted to Boaz? Did she care about being attracted to him? You know, like, there's all these questions that come to mind. But I think ultimately, where she lands is on the side of God, like Will was talking about, right? She knows the right path, and she's going to pursue it. And it's interesting to me that you see these stories of people, particularly Gentiles, that come to know who God is, and they seem to stay the path much more steadily than the Israelites who knew him all along, right? Dan? It's exactly right. And in fact, it's funny because I thought, should I put that next question as, how does this apply? And I chose not to. I just was going to bring it up naturally, but you did it for me, so thank you. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. She had other options in the same way that we think we have other options as well. But what we will find out if we choose one of those is they weren't actually ever really a viable option to begin with, because they take us away from God. And this whole story starts with Elimelech making the choice that takes him away from God, which is why they were all in the trouble that they're in. Okay, who has 10 through 13? Okay, so Boaz's response to Ruth's request, he sees the nobility of her character. He has already commented on her worthiness, and now he says, you have a noble character. This sounds familiar because Boaz is described as having a noble character. Also, the original language in this section is the same language that's used in Proverbs 31 to talk about the virtuous woman. So what we're seeing here is that a lot of virtue and faith and obedience and godliness, nobility in Ruth. And I think Boaz understands the point that Lindsay was making a minute ago, because he's thinking to himself, she's more concerned about Naomi's lineage than she is about herself. Because if she was concerned about herself, she might be trying to make some other decisions here, right? But there's more to it than just her own satisfaction or what she might want. And so his response to that is he asks the Lord bless her, because he sees her as being a woman who's making spiritual decisions based on the needs of others, more so than being someone who's self-centered and making decisions just for themselves. Which, of course, makes me want to ask, do we approach God in the same way? I know I personally, if I were to if I had a transcript of every prayer I prayed, I'd probably be appalled at the me talk in the prayers. I mean, I pray for other people, of course I do, but I think I spend a whole lot of time talking about the things that I want. And this section of Ruth just helps me be maybe hopefully more mindful of that, so I can try to think about not just what affects me, but how I can be better at having a positive effect on others. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Okay. Who has 14 and 15? Okay, so this is a very generous gift from Boaz. First of all, he tells her to stay for her own protection. It's the middle of the night. Stay. Don't leave yet. But leave right before dawn. And this is also because he wants to protect her reputation. In Hosea chapter 9, it talks about prostitution being a thing that happened on the threshing floor. And that's where they are. So he doesn't want anybody to get the wrong idea. He doesn't want people to see them together. He doesn't want people to make assumptions about her. And then he also sends her back with food. And it was a large amount of food, 6 measures of food. And I want to ask 2 questions here. Why does he do this? And depending on what your answer is, does God do the same thing for us? Let's do the first one first. Why did he do that? Why did he give her 6 measures of grain? Well, verse 17 is not on this slide. Sorry, go ahead. I know, I was trying to be funny. Go ahead. I got some laughs. Generally, if I make myself laugh, I succeeded. Sorry, in verse 17. Yeah. Okay. So he doesn't want her to go to Naomi empty-handed, but is there a message that he's trying to convey here? Yeah, I feel like I think you're exactly right. And I feel like this, though, is like a leap ahead of what he's already done. Like he's already maintaining probably more than you would ever expect level of kind of help and provision for her. And now he's doing like 6 times that. And I think what he's trying to say is, I am committing to taking care of you. Is that what you were going to say? I got this. Yeah, I think that's right. So if that's right, does God do that for us? You ever feel like God did something for you where he was like saying, I got this. I'm taking care of you? Do we think of it in that way? You ever been blessed by God and like not even really notice it, and then one day you're like, oh wait, I bet God did that. I've done that before. And if we do that, we miss the opportunity of realizing that all of the blessings that he gives us, which is already at a level that is beyond what we would expect, and then he gives his son, which is, not just 6, but 6 Brazilian times more than that. I got a chuckle out of Phil on that one. Dan? That's true. I guess when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, here's the house of bread, giving her a huge amount of grain that she could make bread. And if Boaz is a type of Christ, like Christ is the bread of life. And so God has already generously provided for us, and he's given us way above and beyond in the bread of life. But you're right. It applies in multiple ways. And I think it's a good point to make sure that you focus on the plan and not just the little stopgap measures. Yes, actually, let me jump to the next one real quick because I want to actually make that point. Jacob, you want to go ahead and read? Okay, so Naomi's confidence. Ruth tells Naomi everything that happened, shows her this great amount of food. Naomi is sure that Boaz will settle the matter. I think this is a huge cliffhanger. You're going to have to wait till next week to see what happens. But, and I can't click anymore for some reason. If you could click. My question is actually, what can we learn from this cliffhanger? Naomi has nothing but confidence that Boaz is going to take care of it. She doesn't know if it's going to be this other kinsman, this closer relative. She doesn't know if it's going to be Boaz himself, but she does know that Boaz is going to take care of it. And so I think the lesson for us, since we just have a couple of minutes here, is when we pray to God, we have to have that same level of confidence. Even though we don't know how long it's going to take or what shape it's going to take, he will take care of it. It feels like a cliffhanger in our life, but God will eventually give us the ending that we need. All right. That's all I had for, there we go, for tonight. Be thinking about steps of faith that you might need to take that you're afraid of taking right now. Maybe you're wondering about going outside of your comfort zone or not knowing what direction God wants you to go in, and think about having the faith of Naomi that God will take care of it and taking that step, being like Ruth and saying, I'll do whatever you say. And then next week, I'm going to try to split chapter 4 into 2 lessons. We'll see how that turns out. But just go ahead and read chapter 4 for next week. 3 more classes.